آقای شیران بفرمایید.
Hi there, I'm here with you with another presentation about Microsoft Azure. In our last video we talked about Microsoft Azure redundancy options, and I'm going to pursue my work, and today's topic is going to be about Azure storage services, and if we have time I'm going to talk about the following topics: Azure storage accounts, identifying Azure data migration options, and identifying Azure file movement options. So let's get to it. Azure storage platform includes the following data services: Azure blobs, Azure files, Azure queues, and Azure disks. I will give a brief explanation about each and every one of these services here. Azure blobs, they are massively scalable object store for text and binary data, and they can be used for big data analysis, which also Microsoft recommends us to use this kind of service for big data analysis. And it uses Microsoft, and it uses another service. I just don't remember the name right now, unfortunately. But let's go to the next part. Azure Files. It's the managing file shares for cloud or on-premises deployments. And the other service is Azure Queues, which is a messaging store for reliable messaging between application components. It uses two kind of protocols that I will get to them in a bit. And the other one is Azure Disks, which they are block level storage volumes for Azure VMs. Let's go to, before I talk about Azure blob storage, I would like to talk about some benefits of Azure storage. One of its benefits is its durability and high availability. The redundancy options that I mentioned in my previous presentation I think it's quite enough. I'm not going to talk about it. The redundancy options makes the Azure storage highly available and highly durable. I talked about redundancy in the previous presentation, and you can go and see it on our YouTube channel. The other one is secure. It's Azure storage platform is secure because all of the data in an Azure storage account is encrypted via different kind of encryption protocols like AES or DES, but it's usually AES because it's much more better and much more secure. So, and the other one is scalability. Azure storage is designed to be highly scalable to meet our data storage and performance needs of today's applications. And the other one is its management. It's really easy to manage these kind of storages because all of the maintenance and updates of the hardware, all the maintenance and the updates is Azure's responsibility. So, and also it takes care of the critical issues that happens. And the other benefit that we can talk about is its accessibility, and we can access our data through HTTPS or HTTP protocols from all around the world. And now let's talk about blob storage. I just mentioned, I'm just going to mention these few things here because we are running out of time. blob storage is ideal for serving images or documents directly to browser. As I have said, Azure Blob Storage is it's a massively scalable object store for binary and, for example, text documents. We can store everything on it. And it's a unstructured kind of storage. It means that we can have different kinds of data on it. For example, we can have video streaming data on it, I don't know, image data, we can have even a custom data that we are using for our application development. We can have all of these kind of data in this kind of storage. And I have said it's really good for big data analysis. We can, and the other thing that blob storage is ideal for is storing files for distributed access, streaming video and audio, storing data for backup and restore, disaster recovery, and archiving, and storing data for analysis by an on-premises or Azure hosted service. It is also, and it means that we can run it on our on-premises servers too. And blob storage has some tiers, for some access tiers which offer the most cost effective, which they are offered in the most cost effective manner, and they are hot access tier, cool access tier, and archive access tier. The hot access tier is for storing data that is accessed frequently, for example, images of our website. And cool access tier is for data that is infrequently accessed and stored for at least 30 days. For example, some invoices of your customers. And the last one is archive access tier. It's appropriate for data that is rarely accessed and stored for at least 180 days with flexible latency requirements, for example, long-term backups. And it depends on our kind of work in just choosing which one of these tiers we want to use. We can use hot access tier for our applications, and we can also use cool access tier, but it's if we want high availability and durability and high accessibility, it's better to use the hot access tier. And that's that. And the next Azure storage service is Azure Files, which offers fully managed file shares in the cloud that are accessible via some industry standards protocols. For example, like server message block, SMB for short, or network file system, NFS protocols. SMB Azure files are accessible from Windows, Linux, and Mac OS clients, where NFS is accessible from Linux and Mac OS. It doesn't have any Windows clients. If you want to know more about SMB and NFS, you can search for it or ask ChatGPT or these kind of AI tools that are present today, and you can also see my documentation on it. So let's go to the next part, and the next part is the queue storage. Azure Queue Storage is a server for storing large numbers of messages, and it can contain millions of messages on a single account. There's an example here. For example, you want to perform an action after a customer uploads a form to your website. You could have the submit button on the website trigger a message to the queue storage. Then you could use Azure Functions. It's another Azure service that I have talked about in my previous presentations. Then you can have Azure functions to trigger an action once the message was received. And the last part of Azure Data Services is disk storage. It is also called Azure Managed Disks. As I have said, it's a block level storage volumes for Azure VMs, and conceptually they are the same as physical disks, but they are virtualized. And it says here, with managed disks, all you have to do is provision the disk, and Azure takes care of all the maintenance and updates. Let's talk about storage accounts. This is going to be our last part in today's presentation. Azure storage accounts are categorized in these 4 categories: standard general purpose version 2, premium block blobs, premium file shares, and premium page blobs. And each of these account types, as you can see here in this slide, have some supported services and some redundancy options. For example, the premium block blob has LRS and ZRS redundancy options, and it supports blob storage, which this one actually includes data lake storage too. And you can see the usages here, and I'm not going to talk about it right now. And let's talk. Excuse me, sir. Shall I go on? All right. Let's finish up this presentation. Let's talk about some options for data migration. We have 2 kind of services that we can use to migrate our data to or from Azure, and one of them is Azure Migrate, which is it's a real-time migration of our infrastructure, applications, and data. And the other service is Azure Data Boxes, and I will show you the data boxes. They are some physical instruments. First, let me talk about Azure Migrate. It's a service that helps you migrate from an on-premises environment to the cloud. It functions as a hub, and it helps you manage the assessment and migration of your on-premises data center to Azure. And here is Azure's Data Box. It's a physical migration service that helps transfer large amounts of data in a quick and inexpensive and reliable way. So, the picture that you're seeing here is Azure Data Box, and it has the capacity of 80 terabytes of storage, which is usually used to transfer data sizes larger than 40 terabytes. And the other data box instrument is Azure Data Box Disk, which has the storage capacity of 8 terabytes, which is raw. 7 terabytes of it is usable, and it uses AES as its encryption. And the other one is Azure Data Box Heavy, and this has the storage capacity of 1 petabyte of raw data, which 770 terabytes of it is usable, and it uses AES as its encryption protocol, but this time it's 256-bit AES. The other one was 208-bit BitLocker encryption. And there are some use cases for these data boxes. Here are some scenarios that data box can be used to import data to Azure. One of them is the one-time migration scenario. It happens when a large amount of an on-premises data is moved to Azure. The other one is initial bulk transfer. When an initial bulk transfer is done using Databox, it is followed by some incremental transfers over the network. It doesn't fully transfer it like the first one, just like the one-time migration. Its transformation is incremental. And the other one is periodic uploads, and it happens when large amount of data is generated periodically and needs to be moved to Azure. And we can use data boxes to export data as well. For example, we do not want our data to remain in Azure's data centers. We can use again these kind of data boxes to have our data again on premises, or we can use them to transfer our data to another cloud provider. This was for data. There are some options and ways for file movement. And options are as copy, as Storage Explorer, and Azure File Sync. The first one is as copy, which is a command line utility that you can use to copy blobs or files to or from your storage account. With as copy, you can upload files and download files, copy files between storage accounts, and even synchronize files. And it can even be used to work with other cloud providers to help move files back and forth between the clouds, for example, in multi-cloud environments. And multi-cloud is when we are using different kind of cloud providers. For example, we are using Azure and GCP, or we are using Azure or AWS. We can use as copy to just move our files between the cloud providers. And the other one is Azure File Sync, which is a tool that lets you centralize your file shares in Azure Files and keep the flexibility, performance, and compatibility of a Windows file server. It's almost like turning your Windows file server into a miniature content delivery network. And once you install it on your local Windows server, it will automatically stay bi-directionally synced with your files in Azure. And that's that for today's presentations. And thank you for listening. And I will be happy to answer your questions. Any questions?